welcome back to the JC League House. I promised you in the last video that for those that were interested, I would get a little nerdy and get into some of the problems with why the lintels were so hard to make because they're curved. So to kind of understand that, I've laid out here a little geometry lesson. And it's been a long time since I've had geometry, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. And the room that we're talking about, that alcove, is curved, and it's basically, if you extended that curve, it would just be a circle. So that room is almost half of a circle. So the lintels had to be shaped to follow the curve of that circle. And let's just, review how circles are made. I dug out my drafting set from college, and I don't know, maybe I should tape that on there. And so I'm going to tape a Sharpie on there and draw a circle on my college drafting and my 5-year-old construction paper. But anyway, a circle is made just by, having a center point and drawing an arc all the way around. And there's something called concentric circles, and that's basically shortening that radius, which is the difference from the center of the circle to the edge, and just drawing another one. I can shorten it again and draw another one. Oops, I messed that one up. Or I can make it bigger and draw another one. But basically, you can see what happens is no matter how big I make that circle, these lines stay pretty much in parallel and track each other. And that could just, freehand it. They can just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what you would have is bigger and bigger circles. So if you have a small circle or an even tiny circle, as long as it starts from the same center point, you just get these concentric rings. So our lintel is just a segment of these rings. And anytime you take a segment, or not a segment, anytime you have an area between two of these lines, that's called an annulus. And that just means you have a shape like this. You just have two concentric circles, and they just make this arc. Now, to make the lintel, they need to know really what this arc is, and it changes because if you notice on the tiny circle, it's really tight, and on the big circle, it's very smooth. It gets almost to where it's flat. And let me show you. I'm just going to draw a little pie shape here. Whoops, I guess I could go to the center of the circle. Depending on where you are on that pie, the curve gets flatter and flatter and flatter, or more rounded as you're in the center. So how do we measure that, and how do we tell the metal fabricator what we need? Well, I made a template, and my template was designed to tell the fabricator this arch right here. And so there was a lot of numbers and drawings and things on the rest of the template, but this was the only thing that really mattered, the shape of that arch right there. And there's another way to measure that arch, and that's to just draw a straight line from the end points and get this measurement right here. I'll just measure it in inches since I have it out here. So that's 6 inches. And then to measure from the center to here. And in this case, that's about 1 1/4 inches. So if the fabricator had this dimension and this dimension, they can put that in an AutoCAD, which is just a computer-aided design system. and generate this curve. Now, in addition to knowing that curve, I'm going to try to work upside down, they needed to know the width that I wanted. In other words, how wide it is. And so they should have easily been able to get that from these dimensions, which they had. And then I also gave them the template so that they actually physically could see that arch. Now, I need 2 of these so they can nest together. Now, you can't just make 2 the same and think they're going to nest, because look what happens. You know, they don't fit tight together. The length is way off. And that's, I'm going to get my pie back here. That's because, you know, one of them is here. Oh, I didn't draw a very good curve, did I? And then one of them is out further. So as you slide it out, you need to actually get bigger and flatter. So the curve that will actually nest and fit together are 2 very different sizes. Look how far off they are if I stacked them up. But again, if they have this curve from the measurement that they've been given, and they know that I need them nested, they should be able to program this in their AutoCAD computer and generate the cutting pattern. Now, we complicated it a little bit because we didn't make them the same width. We actually had the one on the outside be wider. And the reason for that is normally we'd have 3 lintels because there's 3 widths of brick. But it was already going to be complicated enough to get 2 of these made. I didn't want to have to try to make 3 to nest. So we changed the width a little bit in the profile so that we could just use 2. So they had everything they needed. They had this curve. They had that measurement. And they should have just been able to cut these out. And then they would have taken a piece of flat steel and rolled it. And just welded it to the outside. Now, when they cut a piece of flat and rolled it to weld on the outer one, you can see it would have needed to be longer. So, I don't know why, but that caused all kinds of problems. Again, they have computer-aided drafting. It should have been as simple as getting this measurement in and then building up the rest of it. Now, I mentioned that, you know, it needed to be angled for the strength, and once steel's angled, it doesn't bend or flex well, so they couldn't roll this whole piece. There's actually big machines that can roll that, but it's very expensive. So we just thought it would be easier to weld them up and make them like this. So I don't know what happened, but as you saw in the video, I had my template. The first piece came out not anywhere close. The next time they made them, instead of making this fat, they made it skinny and welded the piece on wrong so that we couldn't use it because it wouldn't be wide enough. One time they made them too short. I think they got the outer curve correct, but somehow they got the wrong dimension and it came up short like that. They just did them wrong every way that they could possibly do them wrong. And it's really not that complicated because you can take any circle and cut any segment, whether it's a long segment or a short segment. And all you have to do is get the measurement and the distance in order to recreate this segment that you need. So I don't know what happened, but it was a mess. It was done wrong so many different ways, and it never did get correct. You saw, I think, in the picture that one of them nested tightly together. The other one was long enough, but it actually had that gap in the middle that we just filled with concrete. So they're there, they're holding things up, but it was a mess, and I don't quite know why it was so hard. But there you have it, a little lesson in geometry, and now you know a new word, annulus, the area between two concentric circles. And that's, you probably revisited your 7th grade geometry a little more than you wanted, but there you have it, radiuses and curves. You know, when you're in math class, you never think you're going to use any of that, but it's amazing in hindsight how much geometry and algebra and things I use, and I hardly remember any of it. I remember enough to know that I should know it and how it applies, but then I have to go look it up because it's been so long ago. But this house, it is fun, it is a puzzle, and it is a mental challenge for me, which I like. But this was one challenge I could have done without. So I'm glad to move on. Just a quick little epilogue to the alcove. I have had a woodworking company come out and give me an estimate on building the window frames and repairing the sashes to get the glass back in there. So I'm excited about that. We'll be moving forward with that, and I hope to be able to go to their shop and show you some of that process. They built a door for me over at the Lucas Terrace, and they actually did a time-lapse photography of the build of the door. So they're a great company. I've used them before. They did excellent work. So I'm very, very optimistic that at least that part of the alcove will go well. So that'll be the next step there. It may be a few weeks before we get started on that, but we're getting that teed up and getting it in the budget so we can move forward. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, hopefully down in Galveston at the J.C. League House as we get back underway with moving forward with all the mechanical systems and actually starting to put this house back together. See you next time.